Hi everybody, I'm going to try to share this MAP achievement status and growth summary report with you. It's going to be handheld, so it's going to be a little shaky, so bear with me. This is a great report that you can run, and I'll send you another video maybe of how to access the report if you don't know. But what I like about it is it gives all the students in your class, it gives their fall RIT scores, it gives their spring, it actually gives their projected growth. Based on where they started, so how many RIT points they should go up throughout the year, and then their observed growth over time. So you can see if your students are kind of making progress based on national norms, like at the 50 percentile. So this is how I would use this report, because we just did a winter assessment. So you remember this sheet that gives ELA, MAP, RIT alignment to CASP. I would go in, I'm going to look at some fourth grade results. So I would go to fourth grade here, let me see. And I would go to winter, fourth grade, and I would go to at standard, and at standard starts at 207 to 217. So that's where I want kids to be at this point in the year. So I'm going to go with 207. I'm going to write that up here. 207 is the target. And then what I'm going to go through my spring or winter RIT scores and see how many of my kids are actually there. So I'm going to highlight the ones who are not there. So I see 212, 210, 202. There's one not there. 199, 206, pretty close. 198, 198. Everyone else on this page is pretty much there, meeting the standard. Next, second page here, I have a couple, a 196. I have a 198. And I have a 202 and a 200. So these are, I've highlighted kids who now aren't at what national norms are saying is where they should be at this point in the year. So my next step would be, the second piece of data that I really like on here is actually to see what these students are doing in terms of growth. So now I'm going to highlight, are they making growth? So I'm going to go through and say, okay, which kids are not making a lot of growth based on their growth index? So let's see here. Projected growth 8 and they've made 11, that's great. So if they're exceeding their growth, no problem. And as I go down here, I see most kids are exceeding. Here's a kid who's actually a -2, so that I wonder about that. Here's a child who's a -9, I wonder about that. A -2 down here. And down here I'm seeing a -4, a 3, 4, -11, and -3. So those kids who've actually moved backwards on the map. And remember, the map is just one assessment, so the question is, why are they moving backwards? But then when I look at a bigger picture, I want to know if there's any kids who are not meeting the standard but are moving backwards. So this kid is 202, right? But I see that they've actually made great growth from 10 to 15. So I'm not as concerned about that, and they're going to continue the current program because they're making some really good progress. Down here I have a 199, but they've made 10 growth throughout this year, so they already met their growth goal. Again, making good growth. Not quite there, but making good growth. Down here, now here's a kid who is at 206, which is close to standard, but is making growth, but not as much as we predicted. So not so worried. 2 kids at 198 who've exceeded their growth. Again, not to grade level standard, but making really strong growth. So far, I'm not seeing a child that I'm super concerned about. Here's that -9. That student's the one reading at 206. So they started the year at 208, and now they're at 206. They're kind of maintaining. So I might wonder what's going on there. Why aren't they making as much growth? Do they need more challenging material? Going on to that second page, so here's an issue. I see a student who's at 196 and they have -4 growth. So that's one of those double situations where now here's a kid that I actually want to spend more time kind of getting to know, because they're not achieving standard and they're not making the growth they should, although they are making some growth. Down here, let's look at this 198. This student has made the projected growth, so that's good, so that's positive. 202 down here, this student has made a ton of growth. Projected 11, they made 20, so that's a pretty good sign. And then here's that -11, that's interesting, but this student's reading at a 212. So there's something going on there. They haven't made growth on the map, but they're still at grade level. So there's a question mark. And then finally, here's a 200, and I see a -3 growth index. So they're making some growth, but not as much as possible. So that might be another student that I would say, okay, let's take a look at what's going on there. They're not at the RIT range they should be, and their growth isn't what it should be. So when you look at I like this growth report in general because it allows you to see, even if kids aren't at standard, that they're making growth, which is great. Is what we want. We want kids to make growth, and if they're making growth, that's a super positive sign that they're getting the right teaching and they're getting the right interventions. If they're not making the standard, like this one, 196, and they're not showing the growth we want, then that's a student that we might want to be targeting for more intervention or small group intervention, or we'd put in our intensive walk to learn groups, or just be thinking about it. How do we get them more? Because right now they're not achieving where we want them to. So I hope that's helpful. Again, I really like this MAP growth report. I love that it compares our MAP scores across the year. But again, as always, this is one number, so you also are going to take what you know about the student and bring it to bear on the scores you see here, right? So it's always good to use, this is 2 points of data. Be great for you to have 2 other points of data to determine if this is really a student in need or a student who's making progress. Okay, hope that's helpful. If you want to walk through this with me, I'm happy to do that with you again. I think it's a great report. Okay.